name's Claire Kelly and I'm the Manager of Youth Programs at Mental Health First Aid Australia. Mental health first aid is important for adults who work with young people for a lot of reasons, and the biggest one is that adolescence is the peak age of onset for mental health problems. And it might be that we see relatively mild problems now which develop into worse problems later on. We might see quite severe problems now, and if they're not addressed, they're likely to have a massive impact on the young person's development, on their chances of finishing school, and not just finishing but doing the job that they're capable of doing, actually graduating with the marks that they deserve because they're able to do the things that they need to do and want to do and really perform. But I think it's also important for young people themselves to start to get the skills of assisting each other, and we actually have a new program out called Teen Mental Health First Aid, which is designed to be taught to entire year groups, not all in one group because the small group interaction is really important. What we're doing is actually teaching young people the skills to recognise developing problems and also crises, including non-suicidal self-injury and also including suicide, which I think is really important at a high school level, and then getting an adult involved right away. And one of the biggest successes I think we've had there is changing their attitudes about getting an adult involved. So I think it's really important that we're looking at building capacity in a community, and a school as an ideal community for building capacity around youth mental health. I think it's really interesting that schools are so reluctant to talk about this, because I think we've come so far in terms of education in so many other areas. I mean, I think it's been a long time since we thought you shouldn't mention sex in front of teenagers because then they'll never find out about it. And the same with drugs. You know, we're quite open about talking about alcohol and other drugs and discussing harm minimisation approaches to using, and yet with self-injury there is still this enormous taboo. But newsflash is that everybody knows about it. And all we do when we have this culture of silence around non-suicidal self-injury is we continue to make it not okay to talk about, and therefore it's not okay to say, hey, I've been doing this and I need some help. But I do understand the concerns about the issue of contagion, and I think we've got to put that in a bit of context as well. First of all, if a young person becomes aware that a friend has been engaging in self-injury, and perhaps their friend has even told them about self-injury, yeah, they might give it a go. But that's not indicative of a pattern starting. If there is an underlying problem, then the young person needs help anyway. And I think that we need to start talking about it, so we can start saying, if a friend is doing this, you need to talk to an adult about what's going on. And we also need to be able to say, hey, I'm not afraid of talking about this, so if you're doing this, you can talk to me about it. And I think that the same as with everything else that has been taboo in schools over, the last, let's call it 100 years, that we're only at the beginning of this path, and the fact that people are afraid is perfectly okay. But what we need to do is actually move beyond it. We've come a long way with doing things like teaching kids about safe sex, teaching kids about harm minimisation approaches to alcohol and other drugs. It's time that we're doing the same thing here. In Mental Health First Aid, which is our program, we certainly teach anyone at all the skills to say, hey, I've noticed and I care. And I think that really the best person to talk to the young person is the person who feels okay having that conversation, and then we refer on to somebody else. Now, if the first approach is that the teacher goes and says to the counsellor, I think this is going on, the young person's approached by the counsellor, that can be a lot scarier than being spoken to for the first time by a teacher they trust. However, if the teacher thinks, I'm really not the person to do this, perhaps, gosh, if you've yelled at this young person once a week for the entire year because they never hand their homework in time, maybe it's not a great idea for it to be you. But I really believe that in all cases, the best person to talk to a young person is the one who notices, the one who cares, and the one who feels able to start that conversation. And then we refer on.